this activity, I challenged myself to take sailing lessons on Lake Burley, Griffin, then take the wheel of a luxury performance yacht while sailing one of the most magnificent harbours in the world. Ever since sailing a bareboat charter for a week in January 1988 among Australia's stunning Whitsunday Islands, I have wanted to become a competent sailor. In January 2003, I took sailing lessons with the Canberra Yacht Club, but shortly afterwards, a major dramatic event in my life prevented me from improving my sailing skills any further. Taking sailing lessons again was high on my list when I created my Mindset Reset Challenge activity schedule, and I enrolled in one of the Yacht Club's standard suite of 4 lessons over 2 consecutive weeks, which includes 2 2-hour classes that are held on a Thursday evening and 2 5-hour classes that are held on a Saturday afternoon. On enrolment, I was emailed a PDF copy of the club's booklet, Adults Learn to Sail, Sailing 101. My enrolment fee also included a voucher for 4 hours free boat hire to use any time during the sailing season. While Canberra is a landlocked city, the winning design for the nation's new national capital included a magnificent artificial lake, which is large enough for a variety of watercraft, and there is a very active yachting community over the summer sailing season. The main focus of sailing on the lake is the Canberra Yacht Club, which has premises and a marina on the southern side of the lake's west basin. The club manages the season's race calendar, provides boat hire, and has a small chandlery. In addition to adult sailing courses, which are run from October to April, the club also offers classes for children in the school holidays, plus a youth sailing academy and a youth racing squad during term time. The building where the yacht club is housed is owned and managed by the Canberra Southern Cross Club and includes a licensed restaurant and a highly popular cafe which serves fish and chips for lunch and dinner 7 days a week, with dining on a magnificent terrace which has water views over the lake. The first Thursday night lesson was held in the Yacht Club's classroom and covered the basics of sailing theory, much of which I remembered from having done the class before, but it was good to have a refresher. We were then scheduled for a half-day sailing lesson the following Saturday afternoon. As the weather was cold and stormy early that morning, I went to Anaconda and bought a wetsuit, only to receive a text message from the sailing school an hour later saying that the lesson had been cancelled. The second Thursday night class focused on learning how to rig the club's catamarans, which was relatively straightforward as there was only one sail. We then selected a life jacket and launched the Hobie Cats in the late afternoon sun. However, while it was a beautiful warm evening, there was almost no wind, so we sat becalmed, watching a beautiful sunset and lazing on the catamaran's very comfortable trampoline. Well, here I am at the Yacht Club on Saturday, must be Saturday 5th of April, getting ready for sailing class. It's going to be pretty hectic out there on the lake because it's really quite windy already today. We spent 15 minutes in the classroom being briefed on the course we were to sail in the eastern end of West Basin. Instead of the Hobie Cats, we were to sail the Quests, which we then went out to rig. We'd been shown how to do this the previous Thursday, but there was a complicated sequence to follow, and so it took a while to get it all done correctly. Because it was going to be so windy on the water, we reefed the mainsail to reduce the sail's surface area, which was reassuring, but also made me a little nervous. Well, it is a really, really windy afternoon, and we're still going out, so I'm not too sure about this. I'm just going into the clubhouse to get my gloves and find my courage. We launched the Quests in the relative calm of the bay. But when we got to West Basin, the wind was indeed challenging. Sailing in strong winds on Lake Burley Griffin is known to be tricky because the prevailing wind comes from the northwest, but it is blocked by the nearby Black Mountain, which makes the wind very gusty as it sweeps around each side. And so it was that day. No sooner than the boat was sailing steadily in one direction, it was hit by a strong gust from the other direction. Apart from the previous Thursday evening sailing the Hobie Cat, my crew companion hadn't held the tiller of a small yacht before, and he, understandably, struggled to keep the boat sailing smoothly. Too afraid to take the tiller myself, I spent the whole hour kneeling in the centre of the hull at the front of the boat, operating the jib ropes, while constantly ready to swing my weight whichever way was necessary to counteract the strong gusts of wind. It was a relief to get back into the relative calm of the bay, but I was exhausted. That was very hectic. We went out for about 40 minutes, a bit more, and the wind on the lake was absolutely shocking. It is really windy. Really windy is not the problem. The problem is gusting. So 1 minute you're sailing nicely, the next minute you're thrown over the other way. You just get it steady, thrown over the other way. I was feeling so nauseous. After a break, we went out a second time. Most of the group opted to take the faster quests again, while my sailing partner and I agreed that we'd prefer to take a catamaran, as it would be easier to manage in the gusting wind, and we could build our sailing confidence better that way. I arrived at the yacht club early the following Saturday to find that the traditional boat squadron was holding its annual Canberra Wooden Boat Fest, and I wandered around in the sun for a while, talking to some of the owners and admiring the design and craftsmanship of these old maritime treasures. Back at the sailing school, the class set about rigging the quest boats again. By now we were becoming more familiar with the process, and it took less time, although there were still some moments when we had to ask for assistance from one of the sailing club staff members. Our chief instructor then gave us a demonstration of the difference between tacking and jibing. In essence, tacking is when you're sailing into the wind and means turning the bow of the boat towards and through the wind, while jibing is sailing away from the wind and means turning the stern of the boat through the wind. The wind was gentle when we launched into the bay, and our main problem was steering the boat far enough away from the flotilla of wooden boats docked at the jetty so we didn't drift into any of them. In the 2 previous sailing sessions, I'd let my crew partner captain the craft because he hadn't had any previous sailing experience, while I had. But that morning, for the first time, I took the tiller. In addition, I had, at last, lashed the GoPro camera to the base of the mast and was thus finally able to get some clear footage of me sailing. We spent about an hour manoeuvring figure 8s around a course of 3 buoys in the eastern part of West Basin. This was the best sailing we'd had so far. The wind was strong enough to mostly keep us in motion, but not so strong that we spent more time focused on staying upright than on learning to sail, as we had on the previous Saturday. We drifted back into the bay and had lunch on the lawn in front of the yacht club, listening to the brass band which had been engaged to entertain members and guests of the traditional boat squadron. In our second session sailing that afternoon, my sailing partner was keen to practice a capsize recovery. We'd already had demonstrations of how to upright both the Hobie Cat and the Quest, but nothing quite prepares you for suddenly being ditched into cold, murky water. I'd done this a couple of times in the course I did 20 years ago and had had recent experience of swimming in the lake, plus I was wearing a wetsuit, so I was ambivalent about doing it again, but my sailing companion was keen to try. As the wind was so calm, he had to actually topple the boat over, and then I backflipped after him. I was wearing the GoPro, so I was able to capture the struggle that followed to get the boat upright and, more importantly, to get me back into the boat, which I found quite difficult and certainly couldn't have done without my partner's help, which was quite a shock for me as I had been able to do it previously, although this boat did have a very high transom. By the end of the afternoon there was no wind at all, and we had to be towed back into the bay by the club's motorboat with another yacht on the other side. I was sad when we de-rigged our quest afterwards. This was the last weekend of the sailing season, and despite the gift vouchers, I wouldn't get a chance to sail again until next spring. Well, that is, not in Canberra, so I planned a trip to one of the best places to sail in Australia. Sydney Harbour is one of the world's most magnificent stretches of water to be surrounded by a city. With 240 kilometres of shoreline, the water covers an area of 55 square kilometres and provides a direct transport route from the inner city to Sydney's many harbourside suburbs by hydrofoil or ferry. Plus the harbour is a world-class location for recreational watercraft, particularly competitive sailing. I had been on a yacht on Sydney Harbour once before, but that was a long time ago and on a very big boat with lots of other people, so I'd booked a 3-hour afternoon session with Sydney by sail on a smaller but nevertheless exciting 10-metre yacht. With a free morning when I arrived in Sydney, I first went to one of the major centres of sailing in this country, the Cruising Yacht Club of Australia in Rushcutters Bay, so that I could listen to the clink of the halyards and admire the billions of dollars worth of luxury craft moored in the marina. After a late breakfast in the sun, I purchased a cap from the clubhouse, then had a leisurely coffee at Flybridge Cafe. At midday, I headed over to Darling Harbour, where Sydney by Sail operates out of a dock adjacent to the Maritime Museum. Our yacht was a 2019 French Dafour 310 named Sooty Tern, which we boarded via another yacht. As well as our skipper, Will, and myself, there was a couple from Nara, and 4 people turned out to be a good number for its compact size. When we were clear of the dock, Will offered for one of us to take the wheel, and I volunteered, totally thrilled to be steering as we motored out of Darling Harbour in utterly perfect weather. Actually, the day was a little too perfect because there was insufficient wind to ensure that, if we were under sail, we safely negotiated the bridge pylons and commercial traffic near Circular Quay, so we motored on until we were past the Opera House, after which Will finally hoisted the mainsail and let out the jib. However, the wind was still so slight that we moved at much the same speed as we had when we were under power. My companions had brought with them a bottle of Prosecco and a large charcuterie board, which they enjoyed, and soon after I followed at their invitation. We sailed as far east as Shark Island, then turned about and headed west towards the city again. By the time we got back to Darling Harbour, 3 fabulously serene hours had slipped by, and I was immensely sad that the boat wasn't mine and that I couldn't take it out the heads to the sea and turn portside towards Queensland. The hours I'd spent on a boat over the previous few weeks had been all too brief, but I was absolutely certain as I drove home to Canberra that the day's happy adventure wasn't the last time I'd be sailing. the Canberra Yacht Club Level 1 beginner sailing course cost $620. Given it was autumn when I was sailing and the lake water was getting cold, I purchased a wetsuit from Anaconda for $99.99 and a pair of sailing gloves for $29.99, plus I bought a pair of reef shoes from Big W at a cost of $10. The Sydney by sail trip cost $255 for a 3-hour cruise around Sydney Harbour. The drive to and from Sydney was a total of 590 kilometres, which cost about $90 in petrol. Coffee at Krispy Kreme at the Pheasant's Nest truck stop on the way to Sydney cost $4.90. I paid $40.34 in road tolls in and out of the city. Parking at Rushcutters Bay was free for 4 hours, and while I should have paid $90 for Wilson's parking in the city, when I went to pay on leaving, the boom gate was already raised and the card reader display said free, which was a mystery, but I didn't protest. Coffee and an almond croissant at Flybridge Cafe at Rushcutters Bay cost $12.50. I didn't need to buy food on the 4-hour drive home, as I ate the leftovers of the charcuterie board that my boating companions had generously passed over to me as they were going out that night for dinner. In my next episode, I go to the wonderful Western Plains Zoo to be reminded that I was once a zoologist and asleep with the animals in Billabong Camp. For more information about living your own unlived life, if you go to my website, you can download a copy of my free book, Living Your Unlived Life, Finding Contentment by Honouring Your Dreams. And if it's your thing, you could like this video and subscribe to my channel.